fight, he also renewed the call for a federal law to reform the police.
I want everybody to know, if they can make federal laws to protect the birds, then they can make federal laws to protect people of color. On May 25th, my brother was murdered for the world to see. That was a modern-day lynching, and everybody's seen that. So that's why people stood all around the world for George, because that was a tragedy.
The Israeli military says it's seeking to occupy 75% of Gaza within 2 months as part of its new offensive against Hamas. It's poised to launch a ground assault with the tens of thousands of troops it's deployed to the territory. Meta Sikrika has the details.
When the IDF launched its expanded ground operation, Gaza's 2 million inhabitants will be herded into an area amounting to just a quarter of the territory. They will be kept in 3 small zones. A new so-called safe zone in Al-Mawasi on the southern coast, a strip of land in the al-Seela and Nusayrat in central Gaza, and in the center of Gaza City. The Israeli media is reporting that the IDF's focus is now less on eliminating Hamas fighters and instead on capturing territory and destroying the group's infrastructure.
Spain is hosting a meeting of 20 countries and organizations to discuss how to end the war in Gaza. In opening remarks in Madrid, the Spanish Foreign Minister José Manuel Alvarez called for an arms embargo on Israel if it did not stop its attacks. He also called for a definitive move towards a two-state solution so that Israelis and Palestinians could both live in peace. Polls are closing in Venezuela in regional and congressional elections boycotted by the main opposition group. The election comes 10 months after President Nicolas Maduro secured a third term amid evidence of massive election fraud. With more details, here is America's regional editor, Leonardo Rocha.
The opposition leader Maria Corina Machado said turnout was low across the country. She said it showed that the majority of Venezuelans refused to take part in what she described as President Maduro's electoral farce. The vote comes 10 months after Mr. Maduro secured a third term amid evidence of massive election fraud. Ms. Machado, who was leading most opinion polls ahead of last year's vote, was banned from running against him. The U.S. has promised tougher sanctions against Mr. Maduro, but divisions in the Trump administration have delayed action.
You're listening to the latest world news from the BBC in London. Germany has urged Kiev's allies to act with determination and approve new sanctions on Russia after Ukraine endured a night of the heaviest aerial bombardment of the war so far. At least a dozen people were killed. The German Foreign Minister, Johann Wadephul, called President Putin's behavior an affront, including against Donald Trump, who, he said, had tried so hard to get him to the negotiating table. The President of the European Commission says the bloc wants to strike a trade agreement with the United States. It needs more time than it's been given by President Trump. Ursula von der Leyen said she'd had a good telephone call with Mr. Trump following his threat to impose additional taxes of 50% on European imports from next month. The French authorities say they believe sabotage was to blame for a second power outage in 2 days in southern France. Almost 50,000 homes in the west of the city of Nice lost power early on Sunday. The airport, too, was briefly without electricity. An arson attack on a substation was blamed, similar to the one on Saturday that disrupted power supply to Cannes. Prosecutors say they were looking into claims of responsibility by 2 anarchist groups. The tennis star Rafael Nadal has been given a rousing reception at a ceremony honouring his record-breaking career on the first day of this year's French Open. The 38-year-old, who dominated the tournament for close to 2 decades, was overcome by emotion as fans and fellow players packed the main show court for the tribute.
For me, mean a lot that you asked here. You gave me some heart on court, honestly, no. But I really enjoy it a lot, pushing myself to the limit every single day to compete with all of you.
Tennis star Rafael Nadal. BBC News.
You're listening to the newsroom from the BBC World Service with me, Julia McFarlane. In 2020, the murder of George Floyd by the Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin pushed the Black Lives Matter movement into the global spotlight. of Americans turned out for some of the largest demonstrations in recent U.S. history, calling for police accountability and racial justice. At the time, governments and companies promised to address bias and discrimination. But now, much of the optimism and hopes for change have somewhat dulled. The number of fatal police shootings reached the highest level on record last year, according to analysis of new data by the Washington Post. And the U.S. Justice Department announced it was scrapping investigations involving police brutality that were filed in the aftermath of George Floyd's killing, just days before the 5-year anniversary of his death. The civil rights attorney, Ben Crump, who represents Mr. Floyd's family, said they would not be deterred.
Despite well efforts by the Department of Justice to minimize and roll back the incremental progress